Let's talk about conditioning. This is something I don't talk about often. I usually talk about barbell sports and hypertrophy and exercise physiology, nutrition science. But I thought I'd put a video up about conditioning. There's lots of ways to do conditioning, just like there's lots of ways to train with the barbell. So Dr. Miller here with what I hope is a useful slide and a little presentation on high-intensity interval training. Now, you can do low-intensity, steady-state list training as well and get similar outcomes when it comes to total conditioning. We've seen this in the research literature. So it's not like high-intensity interval training in itself is better. But what it does do, and there's a classic study with these elite kayakers that were very high performance kayakers, meaning they had won medals at international competitions, right? And it was amazing the study was around just because you don't see this very often, that elite athletes will let you mess with their training. But they took they broke these athletes up into two groups, and one of them did traditional kind of volume training to build their conditioning. The other one did high intensity interval training. They ended up in the same place in terms of their conditioning. However, the high intensity interval training group, I believe it was a third less training time devoted to conditioning. Don't quote me on that, but I know it was a pretty good, it was a significant amount of training time reduction by doing the high intensive interval training. So it's time efficient. So for some of you, this might be a good way to train. If you're an athlete, it could be a great way to train, especially if you're careful with the mode in which you do this. Like bike sprints are a great idea, but doing snatches is not. Okay, so you got to be wise in how you implement high intensive interval training. All right, so let's look at this table real quick and just thought I'd summarize some of the qualities of how you set up your work-to-rest ratios determines the outcome, okay? And so what you're looking at here, WR is work-to-rest ratio. So this might be, if I did 1 second of work, I'd get 12 seconds of rest. If I did 10 seconds of work, I would get 120 seconds of rest, or 2 minutes. I could even, if I did 10 seconds of work here, right, I could get up to 200 seconds of rest. So that's a long period of time. What we're looking at is quality of movement, dynamic. If you jump 5 times, I want every jump to be the same, if not being better over time. We're using the phosphocreatine or creatine phosphate system, or the phosphagen system, some people call it, and there's a lot of names for the system. But it's a short-term energy system. You burn it up quick within roughly 10 seconds, and it's not completely off. It's the dimmer switch thing versus the light switch, okay? But the point is that it's, intensity drives the drives the energy system that's being used. And so for working hard, we're going to burn to this PC system. That means it's going to need this, the way the system works, it's recovered by the aerobic energy system. And so you need time to recover it. And so you don't want to accumulate lactic acid when you do this because that hurts its recovery. So if you work hard, you want to recover completely between. Now, in a training situation, athletes struggle with this because I'm not suffering. What's going on? I remember watching, working with athletes, and even as a former athlete, I became a strength coach, working for a strength coach, knew what they were doing, watching these athletes do sprints, and they were walking back to the line casually. I'm like, what is going on? You're supposed to suffer, right? That was me not having an understanding of the different types of motor unit recruitment strategies and the different energy systems, so bioenergetics. And so 1x12 to 1x20, long rest periods, complete recovery. You're not going to get a lot of reps in, and that's okay, because you should be doing quality work anyway. You only get 3 60-meter sprints in because it's all about quality. Full recovery, make sure they're done well. You're not conditioning, you're getting faster. You're not conditioning, you're jumping higher. Okay? Oftentimes, these two are blended, and what you think is a condition or a speed workout becomes a conditioning workout. Okay? Now that's okay if you're conditioning, but if you think you're getting faster, you're not. You're working the wrong energy system, you're working with the wrong focus. You think you're working on quality when actually you're working on quantity, okay? In between here, and I know these aren't seamless, I get it, but in between here is this 1 to 10. I would say even more closer to 1 to 8, 1 to 6 to 1 to 4. And this is now quality quantity. So this is usually manifest by a little bit longer distance work. So, a 60-meter sprint all the way out to maybe even 400. All right? Now, it doesn't mean you can't do a 20-meter sprints, but it's usually a longer type of activity where you're going to bathe the body in more of this glycolytic output, which is lactic acid, especially if you're working hard, right? Intensity drives the energy system. And so when you're running hard, you're conditioning at a high pace, you're going to build lactic acid up. Lactic acid interferes in muscle contraction, so you're going to see the quality of the movement decline unless you can clear the lactate. So what this type of training is going to do is, a lot of times it's very useful in technical sports to force the athlete to train under high lactate conditions. I'm thinking like something like rowing, okay? You're also exceeding lactate threshold, which will help move it. So in other words, you'll get in better shape. But the total amount of volume you can do here with any sort of quality is going to still be limited, just because you have to decide where the cutoff would be. But if you're running your 100-meter sprints and they turn into a jog at some point, you've now transitioned down into quantity. The recovery periods for you, even if you set them up to 1 to 8, were still not long enough to be able to focus completely on the quality while still bathed in lactic acid. So quality quantity can, again, quickly turn into just quantity. So you're going to have to limit the volume is what I'm getting at, okay? And in this case, because the rest periods are shorter, you could hypothetically do more repetitions, but you'd have to decide where the quality cutoff is. Because at some point, if it turns into just people slobbering on themselves and, losing their marbles, then you just turn it into quantity, okay? So there's this kind of blurred line here between these two variables. What I would just tell you is there's probably a quality standard that you want to see met still. And if it's not met anymore, understanding it's not going to be as good as it was up here with complete recovery. When it's not met, though, like a split or whatever it might be, then you're done with the session, or you've already pre-planned that I'm only going to do 3 of these, 400-meter sprints with quasi-incomplete recovery, bathing them in lactate and making them suffer a little bit, because I know after that third one, it's just a jog at that point. Okay, now we get to quantity only. I don't care what their split times are, just get it done, right? This is where we have to be very careful with our exercise selection, because people are going to be slobbering on themselves and looking into other dimensions, right? And doing all these things as we're getting exhausted, okay? And so now you're at 1 to half recovery or 1 to 2. So you work for 20 seconds, you only get 10 seconds rest, right? You work for 30 seconds, you get a minute off, but you're back at it again. So it's incomplete recovery. This challenges the aerobic energy system to quickly recover. And it's obviously not going to make it. And so the stimulus to the body now is, oh crap, I'm getting tired. Let's go ahead and adapt for the next session to try to get to the point where I have a better aerobic energy system. So when you do this to me again, you do this incomplete recovery, it's now more complete. That's the adaptation that occurs. Okay? And this is about repetitions. This is where you can pile in more volume. Again, being mindful of a progression that makes sense. Being mindful of the exercise selection that makes sense. But we're training the oxidative phosphorylation of the aerobic energy system. Okay? And so this is the key to build that system. Now, when you do this, you're going to improve lactate tolerance, right, and lactate clearance. It's not like these are exclusive. If you're better here, you improve the recovery that happens in the quality movement. So you'll recover faster here or better here from rep to rep. And so you should be able to sustain your repetition quality one to the next better by having a better aerobic energy system. So that's this idea of the aerobic base is building this so you can do more of this. This can be built with a barbell, by the way, work capacity type training. Again, you have to be smart about technique and what you're using to do that. I'm not saying, certain exercises don't make sense for this. But if we were writing a program for an athlete, moving this way would be a smart idea, right? Percentage, allocation. This could be almost 100% for the first couple of weeks, and then it starts to decline to the point right before the season or important event or whatever it is. This may only be 10 or 20%, just enough to maintenance. And now this is what it's all about. We've transitioned through this period as well. If it wasn't a perfect 100% between these two, if we thought this was the type of training was important, we would allocate 2. So you'd slide from 100% here, hypothetically, to giving more of that percentage, here, 20, 80. And now, we don't want to mix too much quality with quantity work just because the fatigue's so high here. But over time, now we've slid this over. So it's like 10%, 20%, and 70% quality over the course of 12 weeks. Okay? And that could be a simple way of setting up a conditioning program. Now, obviously, I didn't include the volume and all those type of things, but in terms of the theory behind a conditioning program and using work-to-rest ratios, this can be a great way to do it. If you're like, well, I'm not an athlete, I just want to get in shape, then you might, and stay in shape, then using this range down here might be a great idea. If you're like, I don't really care about running higher, jumping faster, don't care about all that. I just want to burn some calories and stay in shape. You can stay in this range. Just, again, be very mindful of the mode. Okay, the mode is how you do it, right? And mixing modes is a great idea. So doing it on the salt bike one time and then doing it on the stair stepper the next, or doing, and you're like, well, how would I do on the stair stepper? Well, just increase your intensity, right? You can do it on the treadmill, either running or my favorite, which is incline, right? Treadmill walking. And so you jack that thing up to, an incline that's you're about ready to fall off the thing. Obviously, be safe here. The point is you make it difficult, and then you put it back down again and recover, and then you go back up. I mean, there's lots of ways to do things that are safe and not going to beat your joints up. And then over time, you're taking advantage of these work-to-rest ratios to build your conditioning. So I hope you find that valuable, at least a place to start if you're wondering how to even modulate high-intensity interval training. this could be a good place to begin. If you like this video, like it, and that would be the natural progression. If you like the video, like it. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section. And of course, subscribe to my channel for lots of videos, at least one a day recently, in the area of exercise and sports science, strength conditioning, nutrition sciences, weightlifting, a variety of topics. We look forward to having you subscribe and be a part of this video series.